The character of James Bond has been featured in a total of 27 films as of the making of this video. One of those films was a parody, and another was a retread of Thunderball with Sean Connery due to a conflict about story rights, leaving 25 films produced by Eon Productions. Those include a basically continuous series of 20 films with a recast Bond every so often, and 5 films in a reboot series that tells a complete story of that version of the Bond character. That is a lot of films. I'm sure there are Bond films you love, films that you hate, films that made you go meh. If you like, let me know in the comments. Where did I start? And which are my favorites for each actor? I will explain. Aside from catching parts of Bond outings like Dr. No on TV when I was growing up, my first true exposure to James Bond came with For Your Eyes Only, released in 1981. I don't want to give away my precise age here, but I was a teenager. My family didn't own a VCR yet, and there were no video rental shops anyway. The only way to see movies was when they came on TV, or if they came to the small theater in my hometown. One movie came every week and showed for 3 nights, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I would ask my mom for money to buy a ticket, and if the movie was good, I would ask for money to see it again, and again. She was reluctant to let me watch the same movie 2 or 3 times, but sometimes she allowed it. Anyway, back to Bond. Back in those days, movies were distributed on actual physical reels of film. There were a limited number of copies made, so some areas had to wait for movies to make their way around a circuit or a road show. My hometown didn't get new films right away, of course, so there were plenty of avenues for spoilers, chief among them novelizations and comic book adaptations. That is where I got my first look at For Your Eyes Only. Marvel put out an adaptation, and I got my hands on it long before the film ever got to my hometown. I read through it several times and knew the story backwards and forwards before I planted my butt in a theater seat, but that was okay. For Your Eyes Only is not rated that highly among Bond fans, but it is my favorite film from the Roger Moore era. I didn't know it at the time, but it is the only film that references Bond's marriage, and it removes an unnamed Blofeld from the field as Bond gets a long-awaited revenge. As my first full introduction to Bond, For Your Eyes Only established that this character had a history. I wanted to know that history. Slowly, over the years, as more ways of consuming content appeared, I made my way through the entire series. Here are my favorite films for each actor, if I have any. In the Sean Connery era, I love Dr. No and From Russia with Love. Dr. No started it all off, has a memorable villain, even if he's only on screen for a short time, and produced very iconic imagery of its Bond girl, imagery that was replicated in future outings. From Russia with Love stands out to me because it is one of the few films where Bond was clearly bested by his adversary, Donald Grant, played by a pre-Jaws Robert Shaw. That is, Jaws the shark, not the Bond baddie. It is arguable that Bond survived due to luck, or fuller knowledge of the workings of his briefcase, one of the few gadgets in this film. Even that advantage barely helps Bond win what is one of the most brutal fights in all Bond films. George Lazenby had only one film, and while it is admirable and created an important moment in Bond's legacy, his marriage, it does not stand among my favorites. Sorry, George. Moving on to the longest-serving Bond actor, Roger Moore, we find For Your Eyes Only, which I have talked about before. One of the reasons I placed this film as my favorite of the Moore era is its minimalism. Bond relied an increasing amount on gadgetry, which grew more implausible with every film. Not so here. This is a more grounded Bond, which some may find boring. I loved it. Timothy Dalton has 2 stints as Bond, but I find them forgettable. Dalton is a great actor and could have made a wonderful Bond, but the writing brought aspects to Bond's character that didn't appeal to me at that time. Later on, when Daniel Craig's reboot series was born, those aspects were explored again to greater success. Sorry, Timothy, no favorites here. Sadly, the same is true for Pierce Brosnan's era. I was happy at first because after a hiatus of sorts, Bond was back. The spectacle, the over-the-top action, the comic book heroics. It was nice to see a Bond that wasn't A, geriatric, and B, despondent. However, in hindsight, this Bond is very superficial. The films are shallow, almost cynical in their desire to meet audience expectations. Aside from a few moments in Brosnan's debut, I find nothing memorable, and sometimes forget which scene took place in which movie. By the end, it all got ridiculous, especially the gadgets. Invisible car, anyone? That brings us to the reboot series with Daniel Craig. I love this series, and 3 of its 5 films rank among my favorites. They are Casino Royale, which I can watch back to back to back endlessly. Skyfall, which really showcases an aging and almost beaten Bond for the first time. And No Time to Die, which slams the door shut on this iteration of the character with a finality that I respect. It was the only way to end the series. The Daniel Craig series tells a complete story, and the character suffers real consequences and real loss. 2 of the films were hampered by lackluster scripts, and while they should be viewed, particularly The Lowly Spectre, to make sense of Bond's progress and the through line to the final film, those 2 films don't make my list of favorites. There you have it, my favorite Bond films. Dr. No, From Russia with Love, For Your Eyes Only, Casino Royale, Skyfall, No Time to Die. How about you? Which Bond films are your favorites? If you want, leave your choices in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.